Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer turned career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. But after years of exploring personal and career development, business, money mindset, and energy work, I'm here to tell you that yes, you can move from stuck and defeated to empowered and confident. Ready to dive in? Awesome. Together, let's ditch the struggle. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We have a conversation today with an incredible coach. Her name is Kimberly Jarman, and I'm going to dive right into her bio. Kimberly is a mindset and mental performance coach who helps driven women unlock their full potential to achieve career success without burnout. With a background in neuroscience, biohacking, and mental health counseling, Kimberly blends mindset coaching, stress management, and cutting-edge tools to create faster, transformative results for her clients. Through her signature program, Unleashed Potential, she guides women in breaking through self-doubt, overcoming imposter syndrome, and creating lasting career and personal success. Kimberly's holistic approach addresses both the mind and body, optimizing performance to help women confidently step into leadership roles, making career shifts, or grow their businesses. I loved this conversation. She is a firecracker. I love her energy, and that's why I really wanted her on the show. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation today. Well, welcome, Kimberly. Thrilled to have you on today. I feel we have some really great stuff to chat about today.
Yeah, this is going to be totally fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't we just start right with a little bit of your backstory and how you became a coach and what led you to that path?
It's funny you asked me that because my coaching friend and I were talking about it. Like, how do I talk about this story and not lead off the foot of like my victim story? And she like reframed it for me, and it was like most of my life I just didn't feel like I didn't have any power. Like I grew up in a house that victim mindset was the predominant mindset that they both were taught. They taught us, and that's how we were treated. So I never had I didn't have a say. What I wanted, what I care about didn't matter. And that really like impacted like my heart in terms of like my self-worth. I didn't feel valuable. I didn't feel worthy. I felt like I had to earn it. I had that idea of like I was worth less than others and I had to prove myself. I had to become rich or I had to become successful to be as worthy. So there was that wound. And then there was a wound of not being heard and seen. And so I spent most of my childhood and my teenage years, my 20s, living in powerlessness. And just knowing I was meant for more, but just because I had those beliefs that life happened to me and I didn't have any control over it, it continually put me in situations to be taken advantage of, to be abused, right? To go marry a person that was like my family system of origin. So I entered into a very toxic, some would say domestic violence marriage, right? And, but I have this drivenness, this ambitiousness in me that's like kind of like an F you, I'll show you, that drives me. So I went to college and I got my bachelor's and master's degree in counseling. Got out, got married. He was a college football coach, so I just went into higher ed because that was easy and it sucked the soul out of me. Like I was not ever meant to be an employee. I just wasn't. And keep in mind, like I had been, because of my master's degree, they required us to go to therapy to experience it from the client's perspective. I had been in therapy since I was like 23. We get to like 2013. I'd been in therapy for like 10 years. I had lots of different therapists and I was just kind of like hobbling along. And we lost everything in a flood. And that was like the dam that broke for me because the coping mechanisms that I had, which were working out and religion, couldn't help me. I walked away from religion. And then I started spinning in like PTSD at that point. And I ended up in the psych hospital in 2016 for suicide because like nothing was working, right? Like I was spinning in PTSD. I had no coping mechanisms. I was piling trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, right? And I realized two things when I came out of the psych hospital. No one was coming to save me. No God, no human, no one. If I wanted a different life, it was all my responsibility. It was fully on me. And I also realized I wasn't as depressed as I thought I was. So that's where really my life changed at that point, is because I really took control of my life and I started to figure out like, I have to take my power. Like, no one's coming to rescue me, right? This is my power. I've got to go find it. And I dove into self-development. I found my first coach, Brooke Castillo from the Life Coach School, which like she taught me the model that my thoughts create my emotions drive my actions create the results of my life. I had never heard that anywhere in the therapy world. And I was like, what? These emotions are coming from my thoughts, not all these other humans. What?
Yeah.
And that it was like it gave me the keys to the universe and it changed my life. And I spent 2 years studying underneath her. Then I launched my coaching business because it all made sense to me at that point. Like why I struggled all my life, why therapy didn't work for me, why like the cohort I was in and coaching client or with as students of, her, my coach, my first coach, like why it was easier for some of them to make progress and why I kept running into the same walls. I was like, oh, this all makes sense now. Like I was programmed this way. And then my thoughts created, like in therapy, I would leave and I would just still repeat these same shitty thoughts over and over. Right. And I couldn't control my emotions because I didn't have the skill set to process and just kept going down that rabbit hole of like finding out how to regulate my nervous system, diving into the biochemistry, like my serotonin and my dopamine. So that's how we kind of ended up to where we are today.
It's quite a story, and clearly not just a simple before and after.
No, I wish.
There sounds like there's some messy middle to that story.
Yeah, it's a human experience.
It is a human experience, and this is why we need to share these stories because everyone is going through something. That sounds pretty remarkable, though. Was there a moment where you really tapped into that concept that you were living in victim mode?
I had an inkling of it, right? When I was coming out of that psych hospital, like no one's coming to save me. This is all on me. I think that was the first aha moment that it was like, ah, shit, this is all on me. Right. And that was 2016. So I was 35 years old. And then when I got into coaching, learned the model and like they just kept hammering on us like radical responsibility. You have to take radical responsibility, right? And if all your thoughts are creating all these emotions, and I think that was like, okay, I created all this. I created all this, which is like a painful thought at first.
Yeah.
Like I created all that shitstorm, but also really powerful. Like if I can create that, look how powerful I am. What can I create now with this power?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember having kind of a similar revelation when I used to have really intense panic attacks. And there was a moment where I realized that if I could create this panic attack within myself and have such extreme physical symptoms
Oh,
from
yeah.
it, that I could do the opposite, that there's the law of polarity, that the opposite is always true. And so, yeah, it's been a process for me shifting those thoughts, walking myself out of those. But I rarely have, I would say I don't have any of those right now, but it's that realization that you do have more power within you, but it's how you're using it. And no one
Oh,
taught
yeah.
me how to use it, like to get in touch with that. Or I also grew up, the victim mentality came from a very strong belief within our family that life is a struggle. So that's how the podcast came to be, ditch the struggle, because I was addicted to it. And that was really me thinking that nothing was going to work out. Everything was going to be hard, like not good hard, but bad hard. And I
Mhm.
was going to have to always claw my way through everything.
Yeah, I had that same programming, and then on top of it, they like to sprinkle in everybody's out to screw you.
Oh, okay. That's another layer. And I see this come up actually quite a bit, which, I mean, you don't trust, like you end up not trusting people. That's an intense one.
Yeah, it's like I just became afraid. I love animals because they were safe, and
Yeah.
all the humans were predators.
Yeah, I would say I love animals more than people. I talk about that. And there's a safety piece to it that they're not going to try and do anything to you or intentionally try and hurt you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So What have you now discovered about yourself now that you have stepped into more of a powerful role?
What have I discovered about myself? That little girl inside of me is like just resilient as F, man. I will not take no for an answer. And I've always been that way. Like, I just always refused to be programmed because they wanted to program me and like tame my will in. And I just have this, I'm very strong-willed. And it was like, I will not take no for an answer. Like, I want what I want. And if you tell me no, I will go find someone else to ask or I'll go find another way. Um, so what I've learned is that all the things I didn't like about myself because I was too difficult, I was too aggressive, I was too intense. Those were all the labels that everyone loved to put on me. Um, are my superpowers
Yeah.
and what's going to make me a human that is leading the change for lots of other women.
I love that you brought up those words, especially difficult, because so many women are branded difficult for challenging systems, challenging voices, whatever it is, especially in the corporate world. So I have a background of, working corporate, and generally speaking, you are not encouraged to be difficult, to challenge things, to speak up much, really. They want a little bit of your opinion, but not too much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's really kind of sick, actually. It kind of leads to, I think, everyone crumbling and feeling disempowered. And I think it's also leading to a huge amount of depression,
Oh,
especially in
yeah.
the corporate world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And like, here's a statistic for you, right? 70-80% of autoimmune diagnoses are women.
I love that you brought that up because I feel like this is coming to the surface now. We're talking a lot about autoimmune. We're talking about emotions. We're talking about the biochemistry, the nervous system. I'm loving the nervous system discussion. That's what I've had to learn tons about in terms of regulating because I did not have a regulated nervous system as a child. I was just like, literally, my dad used to say to me, stop running around like a mad dog because I would
Yeah.
be I didn't know what to do with the energy I had
Yeah.
within me. And I was
Yeah.
an HSP or a highly sensitive person. So, why do you think it's mainly women, 70 to 80%, having autoimmune disease?
I think it's a multifaceted answer. I think because it's multiple reasons, right? Like if you look at autoimmune diagnoses, autoimmune kind of a high level back way from your diagnosis, right? Is like cell danger response is what creates the autoimmune. What creates cell danger response? A dysregulated nervous system. What creates a dysregulated nervous system, right? Is like stress, trauma, toxins. So you think about women, we're socially conditioned to be pretty. So
Mhm.
therefore we need lots of cosmetics,
Yep.
which we're toxin overloading our body. Then we also, as women, have thousands of generations of trauma, suppression, and impression that's passed on. Um, we are required to do two full-time jobs, working your full-time job in corporate and being a full-time CEO at home, right? So it's just like it's too much on the system.
It's too much. Yeah.
And I'm not saying men don't have things on their system, but they're typically not the CEO of the home and working full time, right? They don't have all this cosmetic overload on their body. They don't have generational trauma and oppression. Like,
Yeah, it's different. I think we just have to
yeah,
accept that it's different. It's
yeah,
different for men, right?
yeah.
So, what is one of the things that you have started to do, or when you started coming out of this 2016 to help regulate your nervous system?
I did not find out about regulating my nervous system until 2023.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like let's take the journey. So 2019, I find my first life coach, right?
Hmm.
I start diving into coaching 2019. I launched my business. No, that was 2018. Launched my business in 2020. At that point, I'm just doing mindset work with a model. And then 2021, I start adding in the neurotransmitter, hormone biohacking, regulating serotonin, right? And then 2022, I get long COVID. I remember at the beginning of this, I told you I had two coping mechanisms. One of them was religion. I left that in 2013. 2022, long COVID comes in, and takes away the other one, working out. So at that time, like, yeah, I had a lot more tools I could manage, so I didn't tailspin like I did before. But you just ripped off half of my identity, right? And how I deal with stress and stuff, right? So at that point, because I was sick from 2022 until about August this year, well, I started getting better in like February of this year. I just couldn't get over the hump. It was like, I've been dealing with this for a while. I'm a healthy person. Like, why? Right? I don't feel stressed. And then we started diving into like, yeah, it's the nervous system. Like, you don't have COVID anymore, but your nervous system is beyond dysregulated. Like, it is just completely living in sympathetic 24/7. How I know that, I love data, is I have a Garmin that measures all of my health data, right? And it was constantly like high stress. My HRV was down in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Just
and
maybe
that,
explain HRV just for.
yeah, so heart rate variability,
Okay.
it's telling you basically they say what your heart's doing in between heartbeats, but really it's measuring your nervous system.
Yeah.
Right. And that lack of heart coherence. So it's like showing that your nervous system is basically stuck in sympathetic. If you have a higher HRV, like 100 and stuff, that means you're very well regulated. Your nervous system is able to switch on and off from sympathetic to parasympathetic in a healthy way. Your vagus nerve is very toned versus a vagus nerve that's detrained, if you will, for lack of other terms. Like,
Yeah, that's a good
it
word.
doesn't have its ability to like switch over. That's basically what HRV is telling me, is like your vagus nerve is like completely detrained. It doesn't have the ability to switch over. So that's when we started diving in. Like, okay, it's the nervous system part of this that I've got to heal and repair if I want to get out of this and get my life back. So,
And what's been the biggest transformation since you have started to regulate your own nervous system?
I didn't expect this, but I do not take things personal anymore. It's just like everything's basically neutral. Like, you know, the lady at Walmart that like leaves her freaking shopping cart behind her car and like drives off?
Yes.
Like, that used to make me so mad. The manual of what you should do with your shopping carts. Like, it's just like so neutral now. Like, I don't like things aren't personal anymore. I'm just so much more regulated and calm and easier. It's like my window is much more wider in terms of like being able just to handle life in a calm, collective way rather than swinging way over into an emotional response or
and not
yeah.
being triggered as much. Wouldn't you say
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
huge piece of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to live their life? Like, wouldn't it be amazing to live your life and not be triggered all the
Yeah,
freaking
but
time?
I actually think, never mind being addicted to struggle, I think a lot of us are addicted to being triggered because it helps us feel something. It's like we're in control of a reaction. I
Yep.
think we just live in a reactive world. So in order to participate in a reactive world, we need to be reactive. Otherwise, we don't fit in. Because I've been noticing just huge transformations with myself, which I am really excited about this year specifically, of being more neutral, like just not being as triggered by certain things. A whole bunch of different things, but I totally know the shopping cart person. My woman at Costco the other day literally like pushed the cart outside the Costco and just let it fly wherever it wanted to
Oh my
land.
gosh. Love those
She was
humans.
just like, it was hilarious. But yeah, not being triggered and kind of being able to stay in a bit more of a neutral space and observe it as to being like, okay, this is happening. It's not necessarily personal. I mean, sometimes things, depending on the circumstance, can be a personal attack, but 99% of the time it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, like I'm 44 now. I have such a long history with my mom. And I still see her every week. And yesterday, like coincidental that we're having, not coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. That we're having this podcast episode today because she flew off the handle yesterday. And that is highly triggering for me, right? Because that has happened since I was a tiny little girl. So it just regulates my nervous system, right? Girl, this woman, just like my body stayed very calm. I stayed very grounded. And I looked at her and I was like, you are not going to talk to me like that. And you're not going to disrespect me like that. And you owe me an apology. And like, I walk off 2 hours later. do my regulation exercises. You watch my Garmin, it goes down into rest. I would have never been able to do that years ago. I would have
Mm.
stayed in that dysregulated state for days, right? And not slept well. And like, that is a testament to like, you get that nervous system regulated. You can look at people that really trigger you, people that have created a lot of trauma, and just like, and still stay in your own power.
Yeah, you have evidence that you're able to now regulate, and it is very empowering. And the more you do that, then you get kind of you realize it's a possibility that, oh my gosh,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't have to be that reactive person. And it's just really liberating.
It is. And like, yes, we are addicted to that, but yes, we're chemically addicted to that state. We're chemically addicted
Yes.
to cortisol and adrenaline bumps. And we're so tired. Let's say women, we're tired and we're used to being that reactive. And so we're used to living off of the energy of cortisol and adrenaline. So of course we want to be triggered so we can get another bump of it so we can like stay kind of live off that energy more and more. And our body creates more receptors for those
Mm.
biochemicals, right? So lowering that, coming to a calmer state, your body's going to want to go into withdrawals. It's like, no, 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 no. Don't you understand? We have 1,000 new receptors for adrenaline, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. We have 1,000 new receptors for cortisol. Like, we live in a state where you're gonna provide us a nice supply of that.
Yeah. And recognizing that your body has that ability that it can switch what it wants, basically, if we work with it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got my cortisol tested a couple months ago now, and it was just like I knew I wasn't sleeping. I haven't slept properly in a few years, actually. But I'm actually here to say that I've just had 3 nights of actual sleep. So you caught me on a good day,
Good
Kimberly.
job.
And
Yeah.
I feel like a different human. I actually feel like a
Mhm.
different. So some of the stuff I'm doing is helping and working, and it's getting the data so that you have something to work with. And I also have made the mindset shift that I'm absolutely going to change this. And I'm not married to this high cortisol. This is just a piece of the journey right now. And I am also very cognizant what you were just talking about, that it will sometimes feel weird for me to be in that parasympathetic nervous state because I've been in it so much. But I do recognize when I'm in it, and I'm starting to really embrace it. And if I can feel it, I'm like, okay, this feels different, but this is good. This is where I actually want to be. So the more I'm like kind of talking to myself through this,
Yeah.
the more I will get, this will be my new normal.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to, I don't want to be in that fight or flight mode. Like, it's so draining, and it just leads to so much health garbage.
At least autoimmune.
Yeah. Luckily, that's not part of my reality at all. But
Yeah.
there's been other things, the not
Yep.
sleeping, all the other things, right? And I see so many women, and this is also why I wanted to have you on here, who just feel that they constantly have to prove themselves.
Yeah. Do you know that that is actually a childhood survival mechanism?
Tell me more. That sounds so
There's
good.
11. There's like kind of 11 childhood survival skill sets, if you will, right? So from 0 to 8, a lot of from child psychology, our focus is inward. We're typically in theta waves. 0 to 2 is delta waves. We move into theta waves where it's all like internally focused. We do not have the brain ability to analyze. So when mom comes home and she's super tired and she's super grumpy and Kim's knocked over her water and she snaps at little Kim, right? I as a From 0 to 6, I don't have the ability to be like, mom's had a hard day and this is about mom and mom's ability to not regulate herself. I don't have that capability. All I know is that you yelling at me makes me feel unsafe and I don't feel good. So therefore, I have to figure out what I did wrong and to make sure I never do that again because my survival is dependent on you liking me. Because if you don't like me and you throw me out in the wild, I will die in 48 hours, right?
Yeah.
We go to that primal brain. So then as children, our brain comes up with like, okay, looks like when I like did perfectly and I like didn't drop anything and I perfectly ate and I was perfectly quiet and everything was perfect, mom was really happy. This works. Let's keep using this to survive through this, right? And then you have perfectionism, you have people pleasing, you have anger, invisibility, drivenness to prove yourself. So when you like go and you work really hard and you score the goal on the soccer team and mom's like super happy and like brags about you, that triggers that like,
Hmm.
oh, when I do really well, she likes me. This helps her want to take care of me and nurture me or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Feed me. And so then it becomes a survival mechanism that helps us get through childhood. And that's all it's meant for is childhood. Because as an adult, you can take care of yourself. We're meant to let those things go. But nobody teaches us that. So we just stay stuck and our particular activating system
Hmm.
finds evidence that like you have to prove yourself to get worse. Like look at that time that you failed and they were mad at you and they didn't like you anymore. So from now on, you have to continue because we're going to keep finding evidence that you're only worthy when you prove yourself.
Yeah, these childhood traumas, these childhood survival techniques, mechanisms, they stay with us. So much of our lives now as adults are really driven and navigated by that trauma from being a child.
Yeah, your 8-year-old brain is running the
Yeah,
show.
I know. I know. And that's why it can be so helpful to dive into childhood work and therapy and certain things like that and just getting clear on what happened to you. And it's not necessarily your fault for you behaving in certain ways as an adult. However, you do need to take responsibility, which is what you talked about at the very beginning.
Yeah. And yeah, I think there's a place for like to process through it and figure out like what event was it or what caused it, right? But I also think like we don't have to like you don't have to always do that. You just have to realize like, okay, because I have so many clients that'll be like, well, I'm just a people pleaser, as if it's a personality trait that they were genetically born with. It's like, no, that was a coping mechanism.
Mhm.
Now you as an adult get to decide, do you want to take that with you or do you want to let that go?
Yeah, 1,000%. That is an identity that people cling to because it is really a safety net, even if it's a quote unquote negative. Although I think some people just love being like, I'm a perfectionist. And because it lets them do things or be uptight about things or make them feel in control.
It lets them off the hook. They don't have to
Yep.
do any work. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm too direct,
No,
but
I love it. Kimberly, I'm here for it today. I want the directness. That's when I saw you online, I was like, yeah, she's going to give us some good talking to because we need to hear this. And it is an identity piece that we can absolutely shift. If you are someone who has a growth mindset and who wants to shift, you have to want to change.
yep, you got to take responsibility.
Yeah. Like as a small example, I used to not be a great listener. Like I would just talk over my husband all the time in the beginning. And listen, I came from a house where I was never heard. Like I never felt like what I said was heard. And also my parents would be literally yelling all the time. So I would talk over him and how frustrating is that? So now, I mean, I really made such a conscious effort to change this pattern, to change this behavior. I didn't want to be that person that talks over people.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
he says I'm better. So there's some evidence there, but I had to want to change and really look at take responsibility for that pattern that was really quite hurtful to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when people say like, oh, people can't change, I'm just like, you obviously haven't read a book in like the last 50 years. Like there is so much scientific data to show neuroplasticity,
Yes.
period. People can change. Your brain can change. Now then the question is, do you want to change and do you want to do the work to change? You get
Yeah.
to decide that.
Because there's a consequence to changing a lot. When you change, so much in your life changes for the better. And some of it's hard, like losing relationships, losing friends, losing family. Like there can be fallout from when we shift ourselves.
Yeah, you get to choose your hard though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Has there been what you would call like fallout or anything difficult that has come from you going through this transformation process?
I mean, if you talk to my mom, she probably would be like, she does not like me standing up for myself and having boundaries. I will be honest with you, and I kind of wrestle with this. Like, this still is kind of like a tender area for me that I wrestle with because my programming says it makes me a crappy human. But in honesty and transparency, I have a philosophy that You either evolve with me or you live without me. I just don't have a huge problem with letting people go and moving on. Like,
Yeah, it sounds like you have a very strong sense of self-worth when I hear you say that.
I mean, that's taken work, but I think it also is like, I've just had so many people that, like, I've had best friends break up with me, and part of it was my fault back then because I was pretty codependent. Um, so I'm used to like people coming and going. And so now I just kind of get to take power over that. And like, yeah, people come and go. Like that is life, right? Like there's 8 billion people in the world and I can go make a new friend and like it's just that is life. And like holding on to friendships or people close-fisted, like it's suffocating for me and it's suffocating for them.
I think the tighter we hold on to things, sometimes the more we just, well, I think we drain ourselves
Yeah.
energetically. I feel like we're just constantly trying to, the people pleasing, keep everybody happy and hold on to these things. But it's not for our greatest good sometimes.
I think maybe it's self-trust. I have a lot of
Yeah.
self-trust that I can just
Okay.
go make new friends.
Yeah. And so when it comes to the mind body connection, you've obviously spent a lot of time in that space. Where do you start with clients when they're trying to really get their health, their emotions, all of that regulated? How do you help them put the two, the mind, the thoughts, and the body together?
Um, Typically I attract people in that are like they want result. They want a certain result, right? Like whatever. They want to make more money or they want to change careers. They want to start their own business, right? So they're not really super available for like, let's do your biohack your serotonin, right? They're like, whatever, like I don't care about that. So we start with laying the foundation of the neuroscience. Like, how does your brain work? Where do thoughts come from? How can you tell if these thoughts are facts or if they're the stories? How do you process emotions? And from there, where they can start studying the neuroscience, like I want to quote Dispenza on this. Dispenza says, um, when you know the what and you know the why, the how becomes easy. So that's what I love to teach is like the what and the why we're doing this. They start kind of getting a grasp on like managing their thoughts. And then we start introducing in like, okay, your thoughts are impacted. Like serotonin, too much serotonin creates an anxiety state in the body. Too little serotonin creates an anxiety state in the body. Serotonin is a self-confidence chemical. When it's off, it's hard to access self-confidence and it's the rejection resilience chemical. So when it's off, it's hard for us to deal with rejection and failure, right? It feels devastating. So they kind of like get a taste of that, like, okay, I see that makes sense in this as we're creating new neural pathways. And then we will test them. I'll send them the kit and we'll test them. And then when we go over the results, line item by line item, that's when it clicks for them. They're like, oh, I see how all these years, like why this has been so hard because my GABA has been off. And that's why my brain always is like constantly thinking, this makes sense now. This isn't a personal thing. This isn't something wrong with me. This is just a neurochemistry thing that hasn't been off. Then we enter into nervous system regulation, which finishes the painting of the picture, like how all of this ties in together.
And what are some of the results that you see with the clients that you work with?
I have had zero client. I mean, I've worked with like, I do not work with like, people that are like dysfunctional, not functioning. Okay. I don't work with mentally ill people. I
Mhm.
work with healthy people. And I've had zero labs come back in normal ranges. Every single one of the labs that have came back, the ranges are off. Their hormones are off. Their cortisol, like I have yet to see one person with healthy cortisol levels.
Yeah.
Their cortisol's off, so their hormones are off because they all impact each other, and then the neurotransmitters are off.
And then what do they freak out? Like, do they, when they see the data, or are they relieved? Like, I know when
They
I
are
had some
relieved.
data, yeah, I was like, okay. And she actually said to me, similar to kind of what you're saying, it's not really your fault. There's a lot of things going on that, that you are frustrated with because this stuff's happening. We can fix it, but it's not really your fault. This is your body's way of trying to cope,
Yep.
basically.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, they're relieved. They finally feel seen
Yeah.
and validated.
Yeah. The being seen piece, when I feel like that is one of the most important pieces to coaching. And I think it's one of the reasons why it is so powerful.
Hmm.
People are
Yeah.
desperate to have validation that they are either in pain or suffering, or that something has happened to them, or that they're just going through something.
Yeah. For me, it was always about, I mean, the reason I do that panel, right, is because I always test on me first, right? Like I am always my first client. And it was like, why can't I'm looking at all these other people in my cohort that are being coached that are like creating like six-figure businesses in the first like 6 months of their business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm like, well, I made $3,000. Like, what's wrong with me? That was always the statement. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I just got to go fix it, right? And so that creates a lot of shame and a lot of self-blame and a lot of not enoughness, right? And a lot of something's wrong with me-ness, um, which creates a lot of self-doubt and dissolves self-trust and dissolves self-belief, right? It becomes this like storm. And so when Carmen, that's my business partner, she's a licensed naturopathic doctor. When we were doing a podcast one time, I was talking about Elon Musk, and she was like, "Oh yeah, it's like his serotonin's pretty regulated because that's the self-confidence and the rejection resilience chemical." And I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, and it clicked for me. I was like, "That's why this has been so hard for me compared to some of my colleagues." As like, you look at my history since I was 13 and started dealing with depression and suicide ideation, right? I have like this journey, and you start putting, I struggle with infertility. So it's like infertility, mental health stuff, and immune system stuff. That is all the like HPA axis stuff. Is it HPA axis? Is that right? I don't know if that's the right word. Um, it'll come to me. And it's like, oh, this is all neurotransmitter stuff. It's like my body's inability to methylate bees. So then I don't get the right um, neurotransmitters. I don't have a good immune system. It messes up with my hormones, right? I was like, this explains so much about my entire life and why some things are a lot harder for me compared to these cohorts. So, like, let's just go in and biohack that. Let's go in and like get my body to produce normal levels. So it's a much fairer playing ground for me compared to these people.
I think that's huge, is like the comparison piece, especially when we go into, I've done group coaching programs as well, or any kind of event, or we just look at other people and what path they're on. And we get so frustrated when we see people just like excelling or going faster than us. And I think we do tend to be really hard on ourselves and then just beat ourselves up. And really, everyone's starting out with a different chemical playing field.
Yes.
And like, I don't think people look at it that often. Like, because one of the things that used to trigger me, and I kind of understand it now, is people would be like, well, if I can do it, you can do it. And like, there's something to be said about that. However, I was like, but nobody's the same. Like, literally, everyone's bringing different stories, trauma, mindset, physicality to the table. So that doesn't help me that much, because I don't care if you have more education than me, less education. There's so many other factors.
Yep.
And I think what you're getting to is really important here, because there is the biochemistry, there is the nervous system, there is the trauma, there is the childhood experience that is going to shape how we can operate
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and
I
how we
really
can
hope your
succeed.
audience heard that. It's
Yeah,
so powerful, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
we live in so much shame. Like I knew all my life, like I know I have so much potential, and I just could not figure out why can't I live in that? Like why can't I get out of my own way? There's something wrong with me that I can't get out of my own way to do this. And it was like looking left or right constantly. Like I know I'm smarter than these people. I know like I have more drive than them. Like why don't I have all these things, right? And it's exactly what you just said so beautifully and eloquently. It was being told like, well, if I can do it, you can do it. Well, yes, in theory, but I may be starting 700 feet behind the starting line where you're like already 300 feet in front of the starting line. Like,
hmm And it isn't just about the superficial things, how much money you have, the education, all those things. We like to blame those sometimes or like as the reason why we can't do something. But I think it really just it's more cellular. I think it's more
yeah,
cellular.
yeah, yeah.
So what are some of the things that you're loving about the way your life is unfolding right now?
Right now, I found my voice, and that I do not feel afraid of humans anymore. Right? I love that I get to show up in the world and feel safe, and it's safe for me to be safe in the world, and it's safe for me to ask for what I want. And I love that I finally feel worthy and confident and believe in myself enough that I really can have all the things that I want. And it makes me such a kinder, compassionate human out in the world. Like I show up how I want to show up in the world, right? Like I do show up in the world kind and compassionate and patient with people. I get to be the good human that the people are looking for more good humans. Like I get to show up as her every day. I'm super proud of that.
That's huge. And have you noticed that your circle, your trusted circle, has seen this part of you evolve and
Yeah. Yeah.
blossom?
Yeah. We do Marco Polo with me, a lot of my friends, and it's like we just celebrate it. Like yesterday was like, yeah, a big celebration of like the showdown. And just to hear them like come back at me and like it has been like so proud of me and like how far I've come and like I'm very honest with my story. I don't hide. Like there is a paper trail, so why hide it?
Yeah, you are very honest. And that's also why I wanted to chat today because
Yeah.
I really encourage everyone listening to dive into your website and your Instagram because you have so much amazing content there and you're so generous and honest with your stories. And not everyone does that. A lot
Oh,
of people
thank you.
really want just a glossy version of themselves out there. And you got some grit
Thank you.
and you show it. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So what I was saying with that is like you can see like I'm transparent with my story, so you can see the journey of like wow, like she is like she's doing the work. Like,
You're walking the walk or yeah.
mhm.
Um, I'm just curious, like, what is like one thing that you do in the morning or in the day? Is there one thing that you really feel is incredibly helpful to your nervous system and regulating it that's nice and simple that the rest of us can do?
Okay, define simple for me.
Maybe takes 5 minutes or less.
5 minutes or less. Okay.
Yeah.
This in theory could take 5 minutes or less. I love, love, love intentional cold exposure.
You're on the Wim Hof train, right?
I have a cold plunge outside and like I love just like I love how it switches my nervous system over so quickly and so efficiently. That's how I retrained it to be safe and parasympathetic.
When did you start doing that then?
I started that in August.
Okay.
Yeah. Because then I could catch on, like, because it switches you over so quickly. And like because it was August, it was hot, so I could stay in there for longer. And I would notice, like, oh, this feels very different than how I normally feel. This must be what parasympathetic feels like, which gave my brain a model then, like, oh, this is what we're looking for. So I love cold exposure. Um, Second is I love inhaling like two inhales and then a really slow, long exhale. That will switch it over for me. And the third, this is simple and easy, but it's kind of expensive. It's called the Nirvana. It's like $450, relatively expensive, depending. It is a vagus nerve trainer. So it has earbuds that go in your ear and it sends an electrical pulse. And so it stimulates my vagus nerve for me automatically and starts retraining it and toning it. I
Wow.
love that thing.
Okay, never heard of that. So I'll definitely make sure I have all the links to everything you're talking about before. Cold exposure for sure. I'm sitting here looking at tons of snow when it's in Toronto, Canada. So I feel like I can just go outside. But yeah, the cold exposure that I do also believe is really helpful. It's also training your mind to be in discomfort and know that you're safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. So I want to ask a question that I ask all my guests, and that is, in the spirit of ditching the struggle and helping people ditch the struggle, what do you feel is most important to commit to?
That's a good question. It's not going to be easy, but I think the most important thing to commit to is rebuilding your relationship with yourself. We spend our entire lives disintegrating our self-trust. And I think when we can do the work to build up self-trust again and show our brain that it can trust us, and show our brain that we are a woman that does what she says she's going to do, and we are a woman that honors our commitments to ourselves, our brain then can feel safe to trust us. And then it can feel safe to take risk.
I love that. And no one has ever said that. I think we look so outside all the time, or things that we can do, or the extra things that we can do. I totally appreciate that. But going within and not ignoring that relationship with ourselves, which I think we put ourselves last and we think about everyone else. And it's just really sad. I think that's an amazing reminder.
Yeah. I mean, people ask me then, they're like, well, how do you do that? Well, like if your friend like lied to you, you wouldn't just be like, oh, she said sorry, we're good, right? Like it would take a while to rebuild it. So to rebuild the self-trust with ourselves, we have to start really small. Like if you drink water already every day right now, like you just kind of already do it, then we tell our brain in the morning intentionally, today I'm going to drink a glass of water. And you drink that glass of water and you're like, brain, like, see, I did that. We start there. And that's how we rebuild the trust, and we keep getting bigger and bigger, showing it and we stop doing things like, well, I'm going to try to go to the gym this week and then not do it, because all that does is it shows your brain that you're going to lie to you.
Yeah. It's not a place of integrity, and integrity is something really important to myself. Actually, that's a huge part of my core values, is coming from a place of integrity, walking the walk. Like, the stuff I talk about on here, I'm really trying to do I am doing myself. And the part I love about what you've just said is the baby steps. I always say baby steps for the win. So it's those small commitments and those tiny micro goals that you actually commit to and achieve that is now going to create the self-trust. And now you're going to want to do some more, and you're going to see some positive results from it. I often just do a 5-minute meditation a day. And I know that's just a little bit, but I'm pretty committed to it. And so that is one thing that is literally 5 minutes. I love these 5-minute things. But we have to be in a place of integrity. We have to follow through on what we're going to say we're going to do, and find the things that work for us too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's thousands of things. Something's going to work for you.
Something
not one
is
thing
going
is
to
for
work for you.
everything.
It's absolutely not. So keep going. Amazing. So where can we find you online? Where can we dive into all of your amazing stories?
Yeah. I mainly show up on Instagram. So Kimberly Jarman Coaching. TikTok at Kimberly Jarman. Let's see here. And then my website, KimberlyJarmanCoaching.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I, again, will put all those notes and links in the podcast information. And I really appreciate you sharing your story today, being so transparent. And I think you're going to inspire a lot of people to really build up trust in themselves again and regulate their nervous system.
Good.
Thanks
we need more women to be 1%. We need women at more powerful tables, because we are going to be the ones changing policy and making life for the next generation different. So
we absolutely do. And that's why we need the Kimberly vibe. We can't worry about being difficult. We have to put ourselves out there, and we have to just go for it and put ourselves first.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. You showing up here means so, so much to me. To dig deeper into the topics discussed today and to learn about my work, visit alanarosa.com. And don't forget to download your free resources while you're there. And if this episode resonated with you, please share with others who also want to ditch the struggle. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and let me know what you'd like to see more of on this podcast. And before I go, I want to leave you with my 3 favorite ways to ditch the struggle. Be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.